Test, test. All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the May 16th, 2024 regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Morondo,
Here.
Vice Chair Lawrence,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Great, thanks.
Chair Clow, Commissioner McGee. Here. Commissioner Reland.
Here.
Commissioner Markey,
Here.
Commissioner Lucero. Madam Vice Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner McGee, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you. And before we go any farther in the agenda, we have a new commissioner today. Ms. Moore, do you want to say anything about the new member on the commission?
Thank you, Chair Lawrence. Yeah, we do have a new commissioner, Markey, who was appointed at the end of April by the governing body. So welcome, representing District 4. Yeah, welcome aboard.
Welcome. Would you like to say a word or two about yourself and your relevant background?
I go by Christy and it's Markey. And my background, gosh, so my professional career was an attorney and policy work, and I was elected to a regional water district board, but this is all on the coast of California. So, and lived here for 4 years, and I'm very excited to serve the community in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. All right, that brings us to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
Thank you, Chair Lawrence. I just want to highlight that the first case under new business, 2024-79-51, the 2768 Agua Fria Street Certificate of Compliance, that case is being postponed to our June 6th hearing. There were some notification errors that are being corrected to comply for the June 6th hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda from the commission? And if not, can I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Yes. Commissioner Reland,
Yes.
Commissioner Markey,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lawrence,
Yes.
and Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we don't have any approval of minutes, findings and conclusions, or old business in this meeting. So that brings us to new business. Cases 2023-7079, 7662, and 7663. Mr. Escabel, if you're ready.
Get the TVs to show the presentation.
The IT in the back can help us get the right image on the screen.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Shall I open it up and share it on Zoom? Would that work? Okay. Okay. Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Madam Chair. I'd just like to note, I think there are some power fluctuations happening in City Hall, and I think this technical difficulty is related to those. I just wanted to let everybody know that. I apologize.
Thank you, Director Klug.
Mr. Cluck, are those political or electrical power fluctuations?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Smith, I won't comment on the political part, but yeah, I think these are electrical.
Well, she can't see it either because it personally is not. I don't know who's. Well, maybe. So that, how is that going to work for the applicant for them to do their presentation? Just so that everybody knows, on Zoom, in terms of staff personnel who have reviewed the application, we have Alan Hook from the Water Department. We have Dee Van Gisner, Technical Review Division, that's landscape.
Excuse me, Mr. Escobel, is your microphone working?
Okay, I'll have to get close. So we have Alan Hook from our Water Division. Dee Beingastner from the Land Use Department, Technical Review Division, which is terrain management, landscaping, ADA, lighting. Leah Yingvi, MPO. Stan Holland from our sewer department, and I believe our traffic engineers in the back. So if you have any questions for those individuals, they're here tonight. There was another event, so our affordable housing staff was unable to attend tonight because she had to attend that engagement. So we'll go to the next slide. And it is case 2023-7662 bungalows on Cerrillos Road variance for setback. Orion West LLC, agent for Advanced Acquisitions LLC applicant. Request a variance from SFC 1455B4 III, Cerrillos Road Highway Protection Corridor of building setback in the Cerrillos Road Highway Corridor Zone 4 from 45 feet to 34 feet. The subject property is 19.26 acres and located at 27794 I-20 West I-25 frontage road within the Suburban Archaeological Review District and Zone C2, which is commercial, general commercial. The second case is also a variance, 2023-7663, bungalows on Cerrillos Road variance, and this is to the slopes. Orion West LLC, agent for Advanced Acquisitions LLC, applicant requests a variance from SFCC 1482D2B, terrain management standards prohibiting disturbance of natural slopes of 30% for the approximate area of 4,800 square feet. And again, same subject property. And finally, the third case, which is 2023-7079, Bungalows on Cerritos Road Development Plan, Orion West LLC, agent for Advanced Acquisitions LLC, applicant requests a development plan approval to construct approximately 186,600 square feet of new construction for 141 multifamily 1- and 2-story housing development project. Same property, same location. If you can move the slide. Staff's analysis finds that, does not find that the applicant appropriately addressed the variance criteria to warrant approval of the variance. The applicant is developing on vacant land. It is just as easy to design a project to comply with the code as it is to develop a project requiring variances. Staff's recommendation to deny the variances is based on staff's findings identified in the staff report. Should the planning commission deny the variances, condition number 5 of the staff report directs the applicant to revise the application to comply with the code and resubmit the revision for staff's review. Should the planning commission approve the requested variance, the planning commission will need to address the variance approval criteria to support the planning commission's decision. So this would go for both variances that we have analyzed. Next. Staff's analysis finds that the applicant has addressed the necessary findings, recommending approval of the development plan subject to conditions identified in this report and within attachments A and B. And again, this is subject to a revised application, meeting the staff conditions without the variances. Next. There are 40 conditions listed in table 1, conditions of approval, page 3 through 6 of the staff report, and attachments A and B of the attachments. I believe that the applicant has been working diligently to reduce that number, which I believe he'll talk about. He's up here. Next. There are 56 technical corrections of approval listed on attachment A. And again, some of these technical corrections can only be done during the construction phase, such as fire protection, construction of the roads. Some are part of that construction portion, so they have to be on there. Some are just minor inconsistencies that have to be corrected on the sheets or within the report. And again, the applicant has been working diligently to resolve those issues, and he can talk about them when he's up here. Next. The property is located again at the 27794 West I Frontage Road, across Beckner Road, northwest section of the intersection of Cerritos Road I-25 and West Frontage Road and Cerritos Road. As you can see, there is a flood zone at the north end of the property when you look at that picture. And again, I'm taking nothing but the images from the report. So all of these images you've already seen. This is just a cursory review of this report, just to refresh your memory, depending on how long ago it was when you looked at it. The project location is plus or minus 19.21 acres. And I'd like you to notice that the I-25 frontage road design. So the original design kind of swoops around the entrance there. This road configuration is changing with this proposed application. Next. The property is zone C2. Adjacent uses consists of the school, which is the New Mexico School for the Deaf to the west, Northwest is De La Luna subdivision, which is all residential. Southwest is the Arroyo de los Chamisos to the north and state right of way to the east. The property just below it is zone C2 and is vacant. Next. The applicant is requesting an 11-foot, not 6-foot, which was in the report, reduction resulting in a 34-foot overall setback from the Cerrillos Road Highway corridor. Required setback in zone 4 from the Cerrillos Road is 45 feet. Again, it's staff's position that if you got a blank slate, you are the master of the design. You can design around these without the necessity for that. Next. These two images identify slope that is subject to another variance, which is the slope variance. So to the left, you're going to see a picture, an image, which is a 2005 aerial that I was able to pull out of our records. And it shows when the original landowners took over, and this was still in the county at the time, they got a permit and they did some grading. So a lot of the slopes out there are disturbed. There is one area, however, which is undisturbed, and this is the subject matter of the variance, which is the natural slope, as you can see, just to the left or to the right of the man-made slope, which was identified on the image. The picture to the right is my site visit. And what I tried to do is just take pictures just so that you can see what it looks like on the ground. And then I provided you a key map image on the top upper left so that you can see how these images correlate with those pictures that I took. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3. And it's just a small area of trees that create a big hill right in the middle of that area. I don't know if you can see the outline. I have them in white there so that you can see the development as it is outlined on the 2005 aerial map. And you can also see those also on your report much clearer on the PDF so that you can see just about where that is within their development. The area is approximately 4,800 square feet. Next. The applicant is proposing 300 parking spaces. Chapter 14 requires 247. There are 36 garages that are part of that 300 parking spaces. Originally, staff was pushing the issue that we wanted those garages just to be used for parking. However, with the abundance left in the parking plan, whether it's parking or storage, I don't think we're going to have much heartburn over that. So that condition that I have in the packet, if the planning commission chooses not to accept that, that's fine with us. He's got plenty of parking in that area. The applicant has revised since the original plan his bicycle parking, and it shows bicycle parking throughout the area so that people can bike to and from the clubhouse. They'll be able to get to the trails that are being built for the residents in the area, allowing them pretty good circulations. They'll still have to meet the design criteria for the bicycle racks. And if they're going to be next to any walls, there's some spacing requirements. Those have been conditioned, and yeah. The applicant submitted a traffic impact analysis. And again, our traffic engineer can talk more about this than I can. So I'm just going to hit a basic overview here. The analysis was reviewed by both the city and New Mexico Department of Transportation. You can see the I-25 frontage road is being modified to allow a safer entrance into the apartment complex, which is a completely new design for that area. City traffic engineers here tonight And again, if you want to ask about the realignment and the process that took place to get to this point, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to provide you that information. The intersections that were analyzed were Cerrillos Road, New Mexico 14, and Beckner Road and I-25. The I-25 frontage road at Mount Nelson Road, Cerrillos Road, New Mexico 14, and Herrera Drive, and the proposed roundabout at the southwest corner of the development. And those are labeled. And again, this image is. The slides identified the amount of open space proposed and trails and sidewalks. Number one on the slideshow is a proposed trail that connects one end, the west end of the property through the open space, which is mostly Arroyo, or all Arroyo and flood zone, to the west end of the property. And it does loop just into the city on the top, and then comes down. Number two, identify sidewalk extensions that connects to Herrera Drive. The entire sidewalk starts at the entrance of the roundabout of the property, and then goes up into the property, and then it will extend to Herrera Drive, where all of the services are. You have the new Walmart, you have Christus St. Vincent's Medical Center there, along with other shops in the area. The applicant has agreed to extend and create a sidewalk that will go from his property to the end of Herrera. Number three is a sidewalk on the inside curve of the realigned I-25 frontage road to the edge of the property. The applicant is proposing to develop, I believe, an 8-foot trail, 8-foot wide trail within this area. And then, number four is a trail along the west side of the realigned I-25 frontage road to the edge of the property line. Yeah, that's a next.
Madam Vice Chair, I'd just like to point out, if you all refer to page 12 of 36 on your report, there's a key that goes with this that'll hopefully make it a little bit clearer. Dan's explaining. Thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant will be connecting to city services for water and sewer and all of those. And this is just a representation of where those water lines and sewer lines are within that development. Next. The water line is also going to have some new fire hydrants. So for fire protection, the project proposes to equip the buildings with automatic fire suppression in accordance with the IFC requirements. In addition, the project will have all on-site driveways that meet IFC standards for emergency access. Gates will include Opticon gate systems for emergency access. And there are 8 new fire hydrants installed, 1 public and 7 private. The public one is the one closest to the roundabout, just on the north side there. The rest of them are internal, those are all private. Next. They've got 4 drainage detention ponds, 3 drainage ponds, and 1 water harvesting area. The water harvesting area is again right just northwest of the roundabout, and then the others are colored in blue to address how they're going to manage some of the retention water. Next. The applicant is proposing what we consider as far as architecture, mission revival style. As one of the primary inches of the city, the architecture style must be revised to be consistent with Santa Fe style architecture that is characterized by predominantly flat roofs, architectural details that are found in the region, including Pueblo Revival territory and revival architecture. So the Planning Commission saw something very similar to this in another subdivision. It was a Haven project. Havenly project did provide 2-story, single-story buildings, but they were all Pueblo or territorial style with Vegas. They were flat roofs. Now, the issue here is whether it's a flat roof or whether it's a pitch. Staff wants to make sure that the architectural style is going to match the area and more appropriate for the entrance into Santa Fe as opposed to creating an architectural style of something in another state, something in another city. It is our belief that we want to keep Santa Fe unique to Santa Fe as opposed to trying to mimic somebody else's architecture. And we believe this is an important feature that needs to be changed for this area. I have talked with the applicant. They are willing to work with us, but I'll let him discuss further.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
I cannot hear Daniel. He is coming and going. But my question is, at the bottom right here, it says 1-bedroom, single story, and it looks like 2 stories to me. Is that a
Commissioner
misprint?
Smith, can we have any questions after, on the presentation after Mr. Escabel is done presenting? But I will work to make sure that he is speaking into the microphone so you can hear him. And then we'll
Okay, well-
ask clarifying questions
well-
after that.
Well, the question, if it's gone, we won't be able to see it. Is it a 1 or 2-bedroom story on the bottom right?
I can bring it back up once I'm done with the
Okay,
presentation.
okay,
Commissioner.
fine. No,
I'm
no
sorry
problem.
about the
Thank
coming
you.
and going. That's probably more to my age than anything.
No problem.
I think I'll move on to the next one, and then we'll come back to that slide. In summary, staff's analysis finds that the applicant has not addressed the necessary findings and recommendations and recommends that the commission deny the variances, which are 2023 7662, the bungalows Cerrillos Road setback variance, and 2023 7663, the bungalows on Cerrillos slope variance. Staff's analysis finds that the applicant has addressed the necessary findings and recommendations of approval of the development plan subject to the conditions of approval. That means the architecture, if you understand what those conditions are, adaptable, compatible with, all of those requirements that you're required to look at for approval of a development plan, the adaptability and the architecture go hand in hand. So condition number 5 states that should the planning commission deny the variances identified in this report, that the applicant shall revise and resubmit their development plan in accordance with SFCC 1482D2E and 1455B for III for staff's review. And this is to help facilitate the application through, since we know what we're looking for, and we're hoping that the planning commission will see that rather than bring it back, it would be a lot easier for us if we can just administer those reviews. I mean, if the applicant doesn't agree with us, he can always appeal and bring it back himself. And I believe that was the end of this presentation. And if we can go back to the architectural slide, and I'll repeat myself for Commissioner Smith. So for Commissioner Smith, the applicant's proposed architecture is a mission revival style. As one of the primary entrants to the city, the architectural style must be revised to be consistent with the city of Santa Fe style architecture that is characterized by and predominantly flat roofs, architectural details that are found in the region, including Pueblo Revival and Territorial Revival architecture. And again, whether it's flat or pitched, as long as it's congruent with the Santa Fe style and appropriate for the entrance into Santa Fe, I think that we can come to some agreement in that arena. And that should conclude my presentation. I can answer any questions if you wish.
Well, I have.
Thank you,
I have-
Mr. Escabel. One moment, Commissioner Smith. First, I would like to just be very clear on a couple of clarifying questions that I had about the requests here this evening. And then Commissioner Smith, you'll be next with your question after that.
Right.
And then we'll have any other clarifying questions that any of the other commissioners have. Mr. Escabel, first, I would like to clarify the variance request regarding the setback. And I want to make very clear that the request here today is for a 34-foot setback, correct? My reading of it says no more than which you can understand my potential confusion.
Madam Chair, that is correct. The applicant is asking for a reduction to allow for a 34-foot setback. But we believe again that because it is their design that's requesting the design, you either build an application to meet the rules and regulations as opposed to building a development that requires variances.
Thank you, Mr. Escabel. My other question is about the development plan approval. My understanding is that the commission today would potentially have the option, not saying what the commission might decide, to deny the variances and then deny the development plan with the analysis of criteria. In such a case, I assume the applicant would be able to bring a new development plan to this body. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, that is an option for the commission. With that comes a brand new application, brand new numbers, fees associated with that, because it would be a brand new application as opposed to either a preliminary approval, bring it back, or a final approval, allowing staff to make sure those modifications and conditions are addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Escabel. I appreciate that clarification. Commissioner Smith, if you would like to ask any other questions that you have at this point for Mr. Escabel, please go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I think this is pretty pedestrian, but to go back to the slide, I was simply asking whether or not the lower right-hand side was a two-story or a one-story, because it looks like a two-story, but it was called a one-story.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Smith, if I erred in my labeling of my slide, that would probably be what you're looking at, but I'm looking at them right now. And let's see, one bedroom, single story. You're right. I did have that as a single story, and it does look like a dual story. So that would have been my error on the image.
Not a problem. I just was a little confused. And Madam Chair, I guess my other question is, in general, is it the case that the commission itself has to come up with a solution if we think that the variances should be granted, that it's up to us to come up with our own solution and propose it back to the staff? Did I understand that correctly?
Commissioner Smith, I can let staff address that as well, and we can discuss it more later in the hearing if it looks like we're going to get to that point. My understanding, based on prior hearings, is that we would, with some assistance, hopefully from staff, have to express how the variances do meet the criteria as outlined in the staff report and in Chapter 14, if we made the decision to approve the variances, one or both of them. Are there any other clarifying questions for Mr. Escabel from the commission at this time? Commissioner Markey, go ahead.
I don't know if these questions are for the developer or for staff, so I'll let staff determine that. But there's a water budget in the documents, and it's based on medical office. And I wasn't sure how that came about and what the plan is for actually creating a water budget for the project.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Markey, I think I'm going to let the applicant and our staff from the water department discuss the water budget, since they are the ones that review the water budget. It could be that there might have been a little error in that. Otherwise, I'll let them discuss it. It'd be better for them.
Okay, and I have a second question, which is the general plan in Chapter 5 on the character and urban development of the city prohibits gated communities. And I noticed in the diagrams, we didn't see those on the screen tonight, but there's a series of diagrams in the packet, and there is a gate indicated in the packet. And so I wasn't sure if there had been dialogue between the staff and the developer about that issue.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Markey, we struggle with that. The ordinance allows for fences and gates. The general plan does not want gated communities, as you alluded to. Developers have the right to present an application in compliance with the ordinance, as the ordinance is what we are going to push, since the general plan is a resolution. I think if that were to be a issue with the commission certainly has the authority to push what they believe to be in compliance with both the general plan for this development and for this area.
A follow-up question on that. You say the general plan is
The resolution.
are you saying it's not binding?
The resolution is, the general plan is the will of the council. Basically, it's direction for us to follow as we develop our ordinances and move forward with the development of the city.
Well, I believe it's legally, I mean, we're legally required to follow the general plan, and maybe I'd turn to council to
We will
confirm that.
have to let legal questions go
And I-
to our attorney, but
Yeah, the other thing is the general plan says should, uses the word should, which I think is always legally a complicated rather than the word shall. So I don't know if you can address that as well.
Yes, and so I don't have the code section in front of me, but the purpose of the land development code is basically to effectuate the general plan. So that is our guidance, even though it's just even though it's a resolution, not binding law, it is required to be, kind of the principles that we use to guide decisions and interpretations of the code. With respect to the code section allowing walls and fences, Mr. Escobar, I believe that's code section 14-8.5. Is that correct? Okay, so yes, so there is a code section that allows for walls and fences. I don't believe it has a section specifically allowing gated communities, as that term is discussed in the general plan. And so I would submit that is probably a something that is subject to interpretation by the commission tonight.
So follow up on that. It's policy 5-1-G-5. It's on page 5-2 of the guidance book that's marked chapter 5. And it does specifically state, and let's see. I'm having trouble finding it in my notes here, but it does say, in order to maintain the community feeling and spirit, gated communities should not be permitted. So I think there's a difference between perimeter fencing, which I think is permissible, and a gate that says you can't enter this property without a code. I think maybe staff can.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Christie, I think, as already alluded, if that's a policy that the commission is going to start to establish as more and more of these applications come in and more gated communities are brought forth, that is something that you will have to address as you deliberate and review the applications.
I would also like to look at the trail map, if we could pull that up, figure 7, and understand how the different trails and sidewalks might connect, and whether people living in the communities around, the abutting communities, might be able to utilize the Arroyo Trail that's being built by this development. I can't really tell from this diagram, so again, maybe this is something a developer has to.
None of the trails that are being proposed for public use, but the trails that are within the development plan are designed specifically for the tenants and for the proper and for the project itself. I think the developer will probably want to talk about those issues if you're going to want them open to the public. Certainly, those areas within the city property are open to public, which is the Arroyo itself. And we do have a trail running through the Arroyo as you can see in the map or on that, on my image, both on the report as well as on the slide.
So figure 7 showed the trails and the sidewalks, and I'm hoping we can get that up on the screen.
So let me kind of move in that direction. I'll try not to talk so I don't get out of line, but I'll point to where the trails are. So first I'm going to point to the city trails where they are, and then everything else is private on the developer's property.
Is there a way to enlarge that so that we can zoom in on?
I'm sorry, commissioners, I'm just trying to, it's a little delayed, but I think, is that a little bit bigger, Dan? I think it is.
That looks bigger, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And for the record, while he is pointing, that is the city trail, correct, Mr. Escabel?
So, right, and I can kind of annotate Dan too as well. So item 1 that's marked up here, this is a trail, you know, within the property primarily, but within the Arroyo open space, so it would be accessible to the public. The red line here as well is the Arroyo Chamiso Trail, that's on city property, you know, in the Arroyo. Then item 2 here is a publicly accessible sidewalk along Cerrillos Road that will extend beyond the property of the ownership across city right-of-way, NMDOT right-of-way to join up with the pedestrian infrastructure at the Herrera intersection. Item 3, again, would be adjacent, publicly available and adjacent to the public right-of-way here. Item 4 as well would be accessible to the public as it's more of a multi-purpose trail over here. And those would all kind of intersect together. And then lastly, this one along here would also be accessible to the public. I think, the interior pathways and sidewalks on the property would not. That's what I think we're with the gate.
And again, maybe the developer needs to walk through this, but I'm just wondering, so that to access the Arroyo, like, let's say I live in the development and I want to access the Arroyo Trail. Is there a gate that I go through to go outside to go to the Arroyo Trail?
I believe so. So it loops, so you could access it on the west side, or you could access it over on the east side.
And that trail I can see does not connect to the city trail.
It is not.
Correct. No, yeah, you'd have to traverse the Arroyo and then connect it. Well, I don't think this is not constructed either.
Question I had, that's a proposed.
It's a proposed trail, yeah. It is being developed across in the Los Solares, development, so, but it's not developed along that yet.
I mean, one of our goals as a city is to have a sense of community and a sense of connection between communities. And so I'm just trying to understand how this community will feel connected to the surrounding properties. And I'm just a little concerned that it does not feel connected to the surrounding properties. But I think maybe I need to direct these questions to the developer. I also have questions about the pool and the clubhouse and the use of those amenities. Thank you.
Are there any other clarifying questions for Mr. Escabel at this time?
I have one. So the proposed trails, the red dotted trails, I'm assuming those are not part of this development. Those are just city proposed trails that are coming. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reland?
With your design and style of the homes that they're trying to construct your dwellings, you're saying they're not conducive to the area, but is it not true that we're seeing a lot of northern New Mexico style homes off Prince Road in the neighboring neighborhood right there? That there are pitched roofs in that neighborhood?
As I indicated, whether it's pitched or flat, and we wanted to be able to work with the applicant on that. See, one of the hardest things to deal with in a C2 district and for commercial developments is we have an architectural points requirement that goes in our code book. But that particular points analysis is geared towards much bigger buildings, larger facilities. What they're proposing is single-family dwelling unit apartments that mimic single-family dwelling subdivision type of uses. So getting the points analysis to try and configure, even if you had a perfect house, you're still not going to meet that. You're still not going to meet that number. So for us to be able to identify with adaptable with and compatible with the surrounding area and neighborhoods as required by the findings for a development plan, we believe that those houses should be in line better with what's already there and more of a Santa Fe style architecture as opposed to something you'd see in Albuquerque, Phoenix, Nevada. We want to keep Santa Fe. Even if it migrates a bit, it's at least you have something unique that's coming back into Santa Fe that mimics Santa Fe as opposed to gradually changing into something we're not.
Fully agree with you. I mean, growing up here, I appreciate the style and everything. Flat roofs are a moment of contention in my mind, just personally. But I'm just trying to make sure that we're taking in full consideration that there are structures in the area that do have pitched roofs and that should not be a point of contention for the developer.
We're not trying to make that a point. We just want to make sure that that holistically it's going to fit within Santa Fe style.
Commissioner Miranda, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to expand on that point, what you're basically saying is regardless of if it's pitched or not, what was submitted doesn't necessarily reflect Northern New Mexico architecture. And that's because of fenestrations, the massing, kind of all the other architectural elements, right? That's just sort of a clarification point for everybody. The thing I'm most interested in, is there a mechanism where we could essentially not basically stay motion on the development plan without restarting the application, but not decide on it today?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Miranda, you have several options. Okay, the first one is you can deny the variances, deny the application. That resets everything for the applicant. If he wants to come in, he's got to start brand new from scratch, pay the fees, everything. You can deny the variances and you can grant preliminary approval to the development plan, bring it back to the planning commission to ensure that what you want to see is what the applicant is going to present. 3, you can deny the variances, approve the development plan, and allow staff to manipulate the development plan so that we can get it prepared and move the application forward so that we can get more housing on the market quicker. But you can also postpone the application and ask the applicant to address many of these issues to come back to you at a later date. So those would be my thoughts on what your options are tonight. I don't know if the attorney has any more or any left.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I don't think I have anything else to add. I guess I would just note that reconvening is an option. I think that Mr. Escobar addressed that option too. So if you need to see more evidence, that's something that the commission has the power to do tonight.
Thank you. Any other questions from commission? Commissioner Markey, go ahead.
Just on this question of what our options are, wouldn't it be a continuance if we continued the hearing so that it wouldn't, I don't know, you used the word postpone, but I think the word would be continuance, and wouldn't that allow us to continue from where we left off, so we wouldn't have to redo noticing, that sort of thing?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Markey. That is something you could do. It depends on how soon you'd like to reconvene. We don't have to renotice if we do. If it's within 72 hours and you give notice, here at the hearing tonight, we can do it fairly quickly. I don't think, I doubt that's going to be what anyone wants to do. And so we do, I believe, usually renotice the hearings if we reconvene. Yeah, so we would probably, usually we set them at least 2 weeks out, so we would issue notice.
Okay, so you wouldn't use the word continuance, you would say we're postponing till 2 weeks out, a month out, whatever. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Markey, that's correct.
All right. Can we move on to the applicant? All right, we'll ask the applicant representatives to come forward and get sworn in for the applicant presentation.
State your name and address for the record.
Brian Nenninger, Orion West, 2213 Brothers Road, Suite 800, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony that you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Ronald R. Bohannon, 5571 Midway Park Place, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87110.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury? Please raise your right hand, state your name, address, and address for the record.
Arl Vermillion, 7500 Jefferson Street Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87109.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Applicants are sworn in, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, my name is Carl Summer. My address is P.O. Box 2476, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I practice law here, and I'm here in my capacity, representative capacity. I don't know what the city's policy is. I don't mind swearing in, but it sort of changes from place to place. I think that there is a prohibition in New Mexico law from a lawyer being a witness in front of a tribunal. So I don't intend to give factual evidence. I intend to make points of law and that sort of thing. But what is your practice now?
Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners, the general rule is that if he is only going to be arguing or expressing an opinion or summarizing facts that are coming from someone else, then he does not need to be sworn in. If he's going to be testifying to facts of which he has personal knowledge, then he should be sworn in.
And all of the facts that I would be talking about are in your packet. Nothing from me original. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on how we're going to handle the report, and because I've got it on a flash drive. The other thing is I'm going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage, but we'll figure out how to do the cursor. Okay, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I have a lot of questions to answer, and I intend to do that. So I think we'll help with some of the earlier questions, and getting the full story on this project. So let's go ahead and get started. As we look at this first slide, this is not only a title slide, but this is also a look at where this site is located, and a couple of things that I would point out. If you look at the bottom left of the green boundary for the property, there is one neighbor on that boundary. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and them and what we're going to do for them. The other thing that I would point out is there is quite a bit of open space along that arroyo, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail here in a moment. So we can, and I should also introduce myself again. I'm Brian Ninninger with Orion West, and yes, I'm representing the applicant tonight, Advanced Acquisitions, who's an affiliate of the Cabin Companies, who develops a beautiful market rate product here. And one of the things that I'd like to bring up is I'm also, of course, representing them on the variances that have been approved by this body in the past, the very same variances. They've been basically recommended by staff, approved by this commission and the city council. And I'm going to get into the history of that and why that is. This issue was not recognized. The only reason why we're here, why we didn't design for this issue in the beginning, because this issue wasn't recognized till late in the game, because in the annexation agreement, which I'll also be talking about, these two variances were in that agreement. As you know, the applicant thought they went with the land. However, there was a master plan associated with a motor company, Beaver Motors, that was going to build basically a body shop and have a car dealership. And that master plan expired. And so this is how this all came about over time. Again, this was not caught in the pre-app. It wasn't caught prior to the application for a variety of reasons. And the applicant fully thought and believed that they had those two variances as part of the annexation running with the land. So again, those variances were previously supported and approved. So let's go ahead and we'll do the next slide, and I'll kind of go through my presentation and try to answer as many questions as I can. Okay, Dan did go through this a little bit, so I won't belabor it too much. But again, this is 141 units, and it is multifamily with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And Commissioner Smith had asked a question. That particular unit was a 3-bedroom, 2-story unit, just to clarify. We have a well-amenitized clubhouse and business center, pool, dog park, fitness center, and then there's about 8.5 acres of open space, which we'll show in a little bit. There is a thoughtful landscaping package that goes with this and a new sidewalk. So just kind of, and we'll talk much more about it, but Commissioner Markey raised the question about how this development is tied to the rest of the community. And this sidewalk from the development heading north to Herrera Drive is a key piece of that. Right now, there is no sidewalk. There is no way from the Mutt Nelson area in that neighborhood to get up to the Christus Urgent Care and to Walmart, which is in that area and that whole shopping district. And there's a couple of restaurants in there as well. Subway's is one on the end. So what we're doing is going to be bringing a significant amount of pedestrian capability, if you will, down to that Mutt Nelson neighborhood. We're not quite there, but we get most of the way there. So I think that's maybe helpful in terms of how we're tying back together. We're well parked at 300 spaces. Dan talked about this already. And then, our main access is off of the frontage road. So the I-25 West frontage road. And I'll talk about why this is important in a moment. And so a real important piece that Dan touched on that we're going to spend a little more time on is the redesign of the I-25 frontage road. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of backups over in that area. You might be aware there's wrecks and some safety issues that what we're proposing will go a long way to taking care of. So I think that's an important piece. The other piece, and again, I'll get in this a little more detail, is that this project would fund those road improvements, which is about $2.5 million. If not for this project, if not for this development, that would have to happen through public funds. So it'd be taxpayer supported at that point. So that's why we're trying to get to a project. So we'll go to the next slide.
Well, if you talk loud, the people on Zoom can't hear you. So that's
Okay.
the problem.
It's a little disadvantaged because I don't have a cursor, but I'm going to try to basically give you a tour of the site. So this is our illustrative site plan. And if you look at the light brown color, which is the majority of the buildings, those are the units themselves. So you can kind of get an idea where all the units are organized. If you go from and by the way, we have 5 different units, 5 different facades, 5 different I shouldn't say styles, but 5 different floor plans. So there's variability within the development. So if we go from the units and we look at the main drive that's running around the property, you're going to see some dark, kind of reddish colored buildings. Those are the garages. So we're offering 36 garages for the tenants. And then right next to that, and where Maggie's pointing now, this is actually working out pretty good, thank you. There is a lighter color key there. Those are the carports. So many of the spaces also have covered parking. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as well. As we kind of look at this site and go a little bit to the north, access, well, first we have the trail that's in the Arroyo, and that's the one that Maggie's tracing now. You might ask, what's the configuration? What determined that? Well, we'll look in a little bit when I start talking about variances at some of the aerials, and that roughly follows a trail that people have just made. Just, you know, over time, people have used it and it's worn, and so we're kind of sticking with that direction. The access points are where the trees are at either end. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We talked a little bit with the city engineer and Dee Beingestner about accessing this trail and how we could use that detail to mitigate some of the things that we're doing with the slope. And I'll get into that again a little bit later. But I think that's an important piece. So there's 2 points from the development that basically create sort of a circular loop to the trail. Now you're a short distance from the northeast portion of that trail back up to Cerrillos Road. Now, I want to clarify a few things about the sidewalks and the trail, because what Dan had in his presentation, we're happy to comply with that. We're no problems at all. But we are proposing, and we have discussed, that there would be an 8-foot trail versus a 6-foot sidewalk that would start at the roundabout. So there you go. And it would run along the frontage road towards Cerrillos. And you can see, there you go. That's really great. And then following that gray line all the way up to the northern portion of the property, because that's a very deep right of way, which we're going to get into when we talk about the variance. It's the deepest, you know, it's 200 feet. There's no other area on the Cerrillos Road overlay like it, even close. And once we get to the north part of our property, because now that right of way is getting tight, at that point, we transition to a 6-foot concrete sidewalk with a 5-foot setback. So you have a little relief from Cerrillos that goes all the way to Herrera. And now we're tying our community in a pedestrian manner or through a bike. You'd like to use a bike to get up to that center. So there's your food services, urgent care, of course, is there, other shopping services as well, back to the site. Now, if we also go back to the roundabout and the main entrance and go south to the property line, that's already an 8-foot trail. So if the city would like or prefer, or the planning commission would prefer, we do the 6-foot sidewalk, we'll do that. Or if they would be interested in the 8-foot trail, we'd also be interested in that. We just think the trail is a little bit more interesting, is a little more inviting, and can get you a little bit more relief on Cerrillos, where this large right of way is. So that's our thoughts. We're willing to go either direction. The other thing I want to point out, at the very lower left, there's a little strip of trees and a berm. So as you look at the roundabout elevation and you look at the top of where those berms are, let's call it the root ball of those trees, that's 7 to 8 feet. And why is that important? Because when those cars are coming around that roundabout and they're flashing their lights, it's not going to flash into Mr. and Mrs. Zamora's home, which is that property on the corner. And they're not here tonight, presumably because we've had several conversations, and we're committing to do this so that we minimize the impact on those folks. So I just wanted to kind of run through the site. Now, the last piece that I want to talk about is at the very bottom, and this is very different than what you have today on the I-25 frontage road in terms of the road construction and the road configuration. What we've done is we've pretty much doubled the queuing capacity. We also have 2 left turns from the frontage road onto Cerrillos. Now there's only one, it gets backed up there a lot. And there's traffic issues that go with that. In addition, we will have additional safety measures and pedestrian islands as you cross Cerrillos. There's already one to the north. We're going to put one to the south. So I just kind of wanted to give you, an introduction to this site. Right now, there is not a product like this in Santa Fe. The commission has approved one other project that has not been built yet, but I just wanted to make note of that. So this is a new offering, a new product for residents to choose from. And as you know, housing is an issue. So I'm stealing a lot of my thunder in the future slides, but this is a good illustrative way to do this. And so I'll go through those a little quickly, if you will. So, and we can come back to this one too, because this is a good one. So next slide, please. Thank you for the expert red line. That was pretty good. So I wanted to point out open space, and the green is all open space. Now there's a difference between common open space that's required and open space that's just private to a patio. It might be a little hard to read, but if you look at the light green, every home has its own private patio, its own little private area for open space just for that purpose or that use, that resident. The darker green is common open space. And of course, we're taking advantage of that arroyo. So ample open space, good for the residents. There's nothing to stop the local public from traversing the arroyo to the north. So the big chunk of green to the north that's in the arroyo. And that's, well, it's by design because there's a floodplain pretty close to there, right? But it's also something that if you've hiked, and I've hiked the arroyo several times, there's a lot of people that use it. So even though it's an access point for our residents will use that as a takeoff point for a lot of other places to go. Even if those trails aren't super established and poured asphalt, they're sort of natural trails that people are using today. So I think that's an important point. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think it's important, and because my eyes aren't as good, I better get mine up here so I can see. That's me getting old. I think it's important to, and we're going to talk a little bit about site background history. So this site was annexed in 2014, and it was an agreement between the city of Santa Fe and Beaver Motors, LLC. And at that time, their plan was to build a car dealership, basically, with the associated body shop and the ability to work on vehicles that came in. At that time, there was a slope variance that was allowed. It was approved, supported by the staff, planning commission, and then approved by council in the annexation agreement of 5,020 feet. We're asking for less than 4,800. It's the same place. It's the same slope. It's the same area. And I can show that on the map because we can go back to the annexation plan and the master plan, and we can show you on our map, and it's the exact same space. Most of this, as you'll see, as we get into the variance, has been graded and disturbed over the years. The setback variance was reduced to 25 feet, and we're asking for 34 feet. So they received more, we're asking for less. And again, we felt, or the applicant at the time noted and thought, these all came with the land, went with the land. And they depended on that incorrectly, but that's what they thought, and that's why we're here. So again, the car dealership, that master plan had expired, and the variances went with it. So we're back asking for some version of those same variances. So there was a lot of people looked at this property. Beaver Toyota ultimately did not make it work. Pulte subsequently looked at the property, and they also dropped it over the access issue because, as I mentioned, there's almost $2.5 million in road improvements that makes this access viable. So while the master plan is approved, master plan didn't necessarily have an approved TIA at that time. And once they started doing this traffic impact analysis and started looking at the cost of what they needed to do to make it work, They decided not to. This applicant is willing to do that. So access has been a challenge for over a decade, and that's why that property has sat there for a decade. And currently we work with the NMDOT and we've got an approved plan. So the plan that we're presenting is approved by the New Mexico Department of Transportation, which has jurisdiction over this particular area. And it's also been approved by the City of Santa Fe's Traffic Division. And I believe Leroy's here, that he can answer questions about that piece. So it is approved. Let's go to the next slide then. So I wanted to just kind of show this slide because this is basically the original plan, the original master plan. And you can kind of see in the yellow, that's the right of way. And I'm going to talk about that because we're going to look at Cerrillos Road, Zone 4, all the way from Airport Road down to this intersection. And we're going to look at the right of way as it currently exists. And what we're going to find and determine is that the right of way here is 200 feet, where the right of way in other areas is at most 60. So I just wanted to just kind of comment on that, why this is unique and why we believe that our variance criteria has been met. So we're also going to make these improvements as we look at this around the queuing. That was a real problem. You can look at this curve and how parking was stacked and stacked and stacked. Neighbors aren't a fan of that. So as we kind of go through this, you can kind of see the challenges. And what I'd like to do is turn this over just for a couple of slides to our civil engineer who really understands, and then our traffic engineer is also going to back up a few things on the design criteria, how we got here, and where we're going with this. Slide, please. Ron?
Madam Chair, again, my name is Ron Bohannon. I'm a registered professional engineer, second generation engineer in New Mexico. I was a third generation engineers. Been here for a while. Prior to the owners buying this, we did my firm did quite a bit of investigation because this had been here for 10 years. And so we talked to the DOT, we talked to the city engineers, we actually talked to a lot of consultants to say, why did the Beaver project not work? What were the constraints around this? And so that's really what we wanted to do, is come up with a solution that the DOT and the city of Santa Fe and the MPO could all buy into, or else we would be in the same situation that Beaver is. We could get a plan approved, but we wouldn't be able to get an access approved through the DOT. So we spent quite a bit of time before they actually purchased the property working through the solutions with that. And so if I can go to the next slide. The biggest constraint is what we have is Cerrillos Road, our Beckner Road, is supposed to be extended to the west. What you have now out there right now is a big sweeping curve that goes to the frontage road. But also to the west is a long range connection over to Herrera and to Paseo del Sol. And so that was what was really driving a lot of the issues long-term for that connection. I can go to the next slide as well. So actually, if we could just go one more slide. So what we came up with was a concept to prove out through a detailed traffic study. And what we had found in our analysis was the sweeping curve created a lot of site issues. So the sweeping curve really needed to be realigned. Then the other biggest issue is the stacking distance from that frontage road turning northbound onto Cerrillos Road. And so those were two huge challenges that we needed to overcome. Then the last one is, again, to have that flexibility to be able to go to the west. And you have, when you start throwing in the alignments, nothing's at 90 degrees. And so that's where we came up with the roundabout design through this area. And so the roundabout design, we worked with the DOT We actually worked with the neighbors. The other important issue is with the neighbors is there's a lot of trucks that go through this. So we actually have designed this roundabout with a full WB 67, which is a tractor trailer as you see being hauled and towed by a tow vehicle. And so that's that vehicle we've run through this roundabout and will work. So that created a lot of constraints on this site. So when you look at it and you say, okay, I've got all these constraints, how can I work with what was left over? And we wanted to make sure again that access was worked, and that's what was our very first step through that area. We have been through the DOT. They have approved our traffic study. We've been through the Access Control Committee. They've approved the modifications to the access control as well. All we're waiting for is the approval of by this body of the site development plan to move forward on it. We do have a right-in, right-out off of Cerrillos that was secondary access for that's required by fire that you have any secondary access through that area. So with that, what I'd like to do is once you understand those design constraints, you can see why it looks that way. And I've been quizzed a lot of times. It's like, that's a pretty bizarre design. But those, if you really look at it, it meets all those criteria. So what I'm going to do is have Carl Vermillion come up and really talk about the traffic study because we spent a lot of time going through the traffic numbers and then also showing that this will work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carl.
Thank you. As Ron kind of mentioned, I was on the team to look at traffic. So Ron talked about a lot of specific things on the site that were needed, and I'll go through the reasons why those things came to be and why the existing conditions proved out that these were needed. So as was mentioned in the staff report, these 4 intersections were studied in conjunction with the NMDOT and the city of Santa Fe. These intersections were chosen due to the proximity of the project. So Cerrillos Road at Beckner and I-25 West Frontage Road, Paseo del Sol and Herrera Drive to the north, the I-25 Frontage Road and the Mutt Nelson Road, and Cerrillos Road and Herrera Drive. So as part of a traffic impact study, lots of things are looked at, and this little chart in the bottom right of the slide shows some significant numbers. So these figures are from standards that are national. So the level of service is a level of serviceability of an intersection. So from the best to the worst. So similar to grades in school, the level of service could be A through F. So A, B, C, D, E, or F. And those correlate with how much delay a vehicle sees at an intersection. So the A is less than 10 seconds of delay. So typically, most vehicles don't have to stop at those intersections. All the way down to F, which is the worst delay possible. So signalized and unsignalized intersections have different criteria. At signalized, it's greater than 80 seconds of delay. So we're talking a minute and a half almost. And then an unsignalized intersection is above 50 seconds, almost a minute of delay. So at these intersections that we studied, we analyzed them and came up with a level of serviceability for each. So you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a lot of information on this slide, and each of those intersections are shown on here, and you can see New Mexico 14 and Herrera, New Mexico 14 and Beckner all have in existing conditions, all on the left of that table, in the AM and the PM peak periods is what we look at for traffic. Essentially the worst case time of the day when folks are going to work and when they're coming home from work. So Cerrillos and Herrera, both of those saw a level of service of B. So very small delay at that intersection. And this is kind of an overall. So each of the movements at an intersection sum up to these. The intersection of New Mexico 14 and Beckner, in existing conditions, my colleagues mentioned that there is some queuing that develops there. And my next slide talks all about queuing, but this one is the serviceability. So you can see those two intersections, the main ones on Cerrillos Road, are operating today with a B's and a C. So it's not the worst. So I shouldn't have noted the city of Santa Fe likes intersections to be at a level of service D or better. And if it's worse than that, that's when we start looking at different mitigation strategies at the intersections. So it was already noted that one of the mitigation strategies was a dual left for eastbound traffic going on to Cerrillos. The other intersections at the very bottom of that table, the West I-25 frontage in Mutton Nelson, Paseo del Sol and Herrera, and the south driveway onto the I-25 West frontage road, which is proposed to be a roundabout. They all operate better than D. So there's not really mitigation strategies that are warranted or needed at those four intersections. I'll go back to the intersection of New Mexico 14 and Beckner. So as part of this study, we looked at lots of ideas that would essentially solve this queuing issue. So one of those mitigation strategies was looking at a dual eastbound left turn lane. So in the build scenario, so the build scenario includes this proposed development. So you can see that the original with a single eastbound left turn lane was as a level of service D and C, but those numbers improved with the dual eastbound left, which we kind of anticipated. So the bottom, we mentioned that the future plans of this connection to Herrera has been discussed. The Santa Fe MPO has a plan to make that connection in the future. So the bottom right looks at that. So that's more further out into the years. And we want to look at what's going to happen closer to the time that this development is built. So two options here, really. If that connection is down the road quite a ways, and if that connection occurs before the year 2036. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this table is looking just primarily at queues. So the problem intersection, the New Mexico 14 and Beckner Road, in existing today during the morning peak hour when folks are heading to work, we see 575 feet of vehicles that are waiting to turn left there at that eastbound approach. So that tells us in existing conditions, there is a left turn lane, a single left turn lane, and that single left turn lane is only about 200 feet. So you can see both the AM and the PM peak hours today are the left turn lane isn't holding all those vehicles. So first thing, we need some kind of a mitigation strategy there. So in the build queue, looking at the dual eastbound left turn lanes, that queue with the development traffic goes back down to 100 feet or 175 feet. So 175 feet is the worst of the two peak periods of the day. So the first thing that's most important for this intersection is to get dual eastbound left turn lanes. Some of those other things that the NMDOT actually wanted us to look at was if so at this intersection, there's a couple of approaches that are we call them a free right. So it's not necessarily stop or signalized. It's more of a yield condition. So that is the southbound right and the eastbound right. So the NMDOT wanted us to look at those two, and they wanted to know if we needed to keep those or not. So further down in this table, you can see that we removed those channelized right turn lanes, and it didn't really fix anything. It made the eastbound right worse for queuing. But you can see the eastbound left was about the same without the dual right. With the dual left, I'm sorry. So with the dual left, it continues to stay right around 200 feet of queuing that is needed at the intersection, and that's with the development. So essentially, that is a needed thing that intersection will need when this development occurs. One of the things that Ron talked about is that sweeping curve just to the west of this intersection. So today, the site is not very good for people coming eastbound on the west frontage road. They can't see the signalized intersection very well. So pulling that roundabout as far west as we could in order to maximize the queue storage for the dual eastbound left. That was our main goal. Go ahead to the next slide. So lastly, the city and the NMDOT asked us to look at crash data along Cerrillos. So you can see there's lots of different crash classifications. So this table talks about 4 of them. So class K is an accident that results in a fatality. Class A is an accident that involves an incapacitating injury requiring medical intervention. Class B is a crash with people that have visible injuries. And class C is a crash with possible injuries.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Moore, is it possible to maybe try using the zoom effect to see if we can see those numbers in that table? Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. So essentially the class K, this table classified each. And so this data was over a 4-year period. And you can see the West Frontage Road in Mount Nelson, Cerrillos and the West Frontage Road, and Cerrillos and Herrera are all looked at. The class Ks, there was 1 fatality which occurred at Cerrillos and Herrera. The class A, which was an accident involving someone that's incapacitated that requires medical intervention, occurred at Cerrillos and the West Frontage Road. And the class B and class C, this is when you start to see higher numbers. So the thing that I want to point out here is that the most accidents have occurred at the intersection of Cerritos and the West Frontage Road. So attention is needed at this intersection to mitigate these crashes. And our development is proposing to make those changes. That's all I've got. I'll turn it back over to Brian.
You would go to the next. Thank you, Carl. So just in quick summary, the improvements are about $2.5 million. So the applicant is making a significant investment in public infrastructure improvements that will address the items that Carl was just referring to. The interchange will be safer and traffic will flow smoother. Without this project, if we can't make a project go there, sooner or later, public funds are going to be used to do this work. So I think this is a service and a good thing for the community. I'm going to kind of talked about several of these items already. So I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Madam Chair, if I may interject, would you like the crash data read into the record? We weren't able to pull that up on the screen.
I think that would be wonderful. Thank you.
I can back up and do that. I've got it here, Maggie, if you want me to read it. So when you look at, I'm going to take one interchange at a time. So the West Frontage Road in Mount Nelson for the further south had no Class K, which is fatality, no Class A, which is incapacitating injury, had 2 Class B visible injuries and 7 Class C, which are categories as possible injury. The next interchange that was looking at was Cerritos Road and the West Frontage Road, had 0 Class K fatality, had 1 Class A incapacitating injury, had 3 Class B visible injuries, and had 30 possible injuries, Class C. And then the next interchange up at the urgent care was Cerritos Road and Herrera Road, which is 1 Class K fatality, 0 incapacitating injuries at Class A, 6 Class B visible injuries, and 23 Class C possible injuries. And I think hopefully that will take care of it. So I'll slip right back down to, I just, since we're still kind of going, and I'm going to try to speed this up because I know this takes some time, but there's a lot of information and detail in this project. So hopefully this is helpful. So just going through a couple of quick development plan considerations. Previous projects, Beaver, Toyota, obviously very commercial, more of a parking lot. And then we're proposing housing. Housing isn't desperately needed in Santa Fe. I don't think anybody here would dispute that. You're all very familiar with that. So we think this project is a good project for the community. In terms of compatibility, I think it was raised that there's some pitch roofs on Mount Nelson. A lot of what we're looking at and doing is in harmony with the neighborhood to the south and to the west. Obviously, there's more intense commercial development across the Arroyo, and there's more intense commercial development to the east across the Rios on Beckner. This project will have a lot split. So if the development plan is approved and we move forward, in order to accommodate this road improvement, we'll have to do a lot split. So we're running this road into the property, bisecting a portion of the property to accommodate this. We talked a little bit about affordable housing, and I don't know if Alexander Ladd will be here or not, but we have been working with Alexander on a fee in lieu of. It's a market rate project, and the current assessment is a little less than $400,000. Obviously, that gets put into the Homes Association or the Homes Fund rather, and you all know what those uses are. Be happy to talk about it if we need to. This is my opportunity to make a clarification that Commissioner Markey raised. Our water budget that's proposed is 26.71 acre feet. And I have to apologize because my staff was putting that letter together and they cut and paste something from a medical office development. So my client's very probably interested here that we're using MOB numbers, but the reality is the number was correct, but the MOB part is not correct. So the standard water division number per unit for multifamily is 0.16 acre feet. That's right out of the ordinance, out of their chart. And of course, we add to that the irrigation budget that our landscape plan basically produced, our landscaper, and then added the 9.8% contingency to that. to come up with our water budget. We will comply with dark sky ordinances, no surprise there. Archaeological survey had been completed by the previous owner and that has been turned into the city. That was one of those conditions, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. The prairie dog survey has not been completed. We have not observed any. If we do find that they're there, of course, we'll remove those per the ordinance. So this is just a picture of the development plan. I'm going to move on from there. You have that in your packet. So now I wanted to kind of address the conditions of approval because there are actually 39 conditions. They're numbered 1 through 40, 12 is missing. So just a typo, I'm going to take all I can get here. 17 of those 39 conditions we've addressed. So the drawings have been updated. We've talked to the folks and that includes a water plan. We have a full-blown approved water plan with the water division. There's another 17 that we're working on, closing in on quickly. And those are all designated to be prior to recordation. And then we have sort of a handful of items that we probably need to address. And Dan was kind enough to take care of some of these early on. The very first one is just trying to clarify that the garages that we have are not required to meet the required parking. And so we just wanted for the record, because it's in the report, to request that we meet parking code. And so that the garages don't need any special designation. Very hard to enforce by lease anyway. The next item, there's a set of conditions from MPO and except for 14 and 17, well, I'm going to address, we're going to try to comply. So 14, the MPO trail width was requested at 10 feet and we respectfully are requesting 8. I think this commission has seen many trails come in at 8 and 8 has been pretty common, especially if you look at the Los Solares area, what's right across the street. So we're just respectfully asking, can we do the 8-foot trail instead of 10? Condition 17 talks about those free rights that Carl Vermillion was just talking about. The MPO has requested that those free rights be redesigned to slow traffic. I just wanted to comment that the traffic design was by professional engineers. It was reviewed by professional engineers in the NMDOT and the city of Santa Fe, and they approved the free rights as they are. Why do we want to keep them? Why do we have a strong dog in that hunt? And the reason is we talked about the earlier issue with the large tractor trailers, because if you go down the frontage road, there are several large businesses that work on tractor trailers and that need deliveries of that type. So at the request of some of these businesses, we designed, oversized that roundabout. It can actually handle a tractor trailer tow truck pulling a tractor and a trailer through that roundabout, and they can get through the free rights as they are. They cannot if we'd redesign those. And again, those free rights, you saw the numbers, you saw how the improvements were made, were safe and approved and accepted by the professionals in this city and also in NMDOT. Conditions 16, 18, and 20 of the MPO, we will comply with those conditions if the NMDOT also agrees, because they will have to make that approval. Again, those are not in the current NMDOT approved plan, but we will submit those and ask for approval to do that. Condition 19, Santa Fe Trails has only requested 1 northbound bus stop. So we want to clarify the record because the current condition says 2. And then finally, moving fast, and most importantly is architecture. So the only thing we would like to say here is that we are willing to work with staff and come up with an architectural style that you guys are happy with that meets Santa Fe style. So if we miss the mark our first round, we'll work with staff to get it right. But we would like to clarify that pitched roofs are part of the Northern New Mexico vernacular, and we don't want to be restricted to have to do a combination of pitched and flat or all flat. We want to do pitched roofs. So that's our only clarification. I think staff is also in agreement that as long as we're meeting Santa Fe style, that may not be a requirement to have flat roofs or a combination. But we just want to acknowledge, because it's in the report and we think we need to be on the record to be clear with this. So this is I'm sorry, Aggie, getting ahead of myself. Next slide. We'll go fast. This is some of the slides that Dan had. We didn't put all 4 all 4 elevations, but this is the architecture we're going to work on. So next slide. I'm going to go quickly. The next 2 sets of slides are about the variances. So we can go ahead and do the next slide. We're starting out with the slope variance. So just again, background and we are requesting 4,765 square feet. I think 1,000 feet is allowed, but once you go beyond that, that's when you need to get a variance approved. The annexation agreement, of course, as I mentioned before, did have a greater number at 5,020. And I just quoted the staff report for that particular variance. Appropriately, I mean, I want to give the background, but I also, with full disclosure, Dan will also comment on why the variance is being denied now compared to why it was denied then. Or I'm sorry, why it was approved then. Spoke. So quick history of the site. Next slide. So we have 1996 up through 2023, and you can see how much grading and disturbance to the site that has occurred. And if you look in the upper right, there's a little dark set of trees almost, maybe hard to see on this. That's where our 30% slope variance is. Dan showed you this slide. Next slide, thank you. So I won't go into too much detail here. Next slide. This slide articulates where that is, where our slope is. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about our strategy. So we spent a little time talking to Dee Beingessner on what, if we could do something that would make you happy and make you as amenable as possible to this variance, what would it be? And so we put together at these trailheads additional trees. So we're acknowledging that there's 11 junipers in that 30% slope area, and we're replacing those junipers with 17 new bristlecone pine trees and gamble oaks. And let's go to the next slide. And this gives you a better full-blown view of how that might look. So we want to do something nice that has some character and has a little bit of its own slope. That would be a nice way to enter to that trail. Okay, so I'm going to, I think what I'd like to do is I want to come back to this slide and the next slide at the very end of the presentation. And I'm going to let Carl Sommer articulate why we believe we've met the variance criteria here. So Maggie, let's go 2 slides. I'm trying to win some friends over here, keep everything going. That's it. So now we're just talking a little bit about the setback variance. Again, what was granted before was 25 feet was the setback. We're saying we'll agree with 34 feet. So we're not asking for as much, but we're still asking for a setback. Now let's go to the next slide. This is the important one. So we looked at the right-of-way from our site all the way up to Airport Road, which is zone 4 for the Cerritos Road overlay. And what we observed is that from Airport Road to Herrera Drive, that range, that right-of-way range was 45 to 60 feet. And that's what you see in green. So once though you get down to our site, almost to our property line, that changes drastically. So from Herrera Road, it's 58 to 200, but when you get to our property line, it's 88 to 200. So we already have a considerable larger right-of-way than what you see everywhere else. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and we were not able to determine if there was a variance granted or they just didn't comply or what was going on, but if you just look at the little strip center north of Herrera Drive next to the Walmart development, the green is the setback. That's that 45 to 60 feet. And the green is the right-of-way. I have to be very careful here. And the red and blue is the setback. So they're not complying. They're only 24.5 feet when the code says they should be 45. So I'm just just making a note that we've already got some nonconformance going on in the neighborhood with a much tighter right-of-way than what we have. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So again, showing the right-of-way in green, what we're asking for in blue, and then what the code says in red, just to kind of put it in perspective. Now, this drawing is small admittedly, but 45 feet is the red line and the 35 feet is the blue area. So you can see we're considerably there. Okay, again, I'm going to come back to this slide with Carl. So I want to close my part and then turn these two slides over to Carl to talk about the variance. We just thought, and I'm sorry, one more. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is it. And then I'm going to make you go backwards for just a second for Carl. But so as I wrap up my piece, and then I'll of course stand for questions. This is kind of just the before and after with regard to what was planned when annexation came along and what we're proposing. So if you look at the land use, you know, one was a car dealership and a body shop. The others are residential community. You look at open space, they had 4.29 acres and we have 8.55. They had around 711 spaces of parking. We've got 300. No roadway improvements. Obviously, the project didn't move forward. We have a significant redesign to solve some problems. The Herrera pedestrian connection wasn't there. We're providing that sidewalk all the way up along Ceres Road, finishing a significant piece. And then they did have variances that were offered or granted, and ours are really pending your approval tonight. So with that, I'm going to ask Carl to just do a quick review, if that's okay.
Go back. Yes. Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'll try and we've been going on for a while, so I'm going to be quick. And I'd like to answer a couple of questions as well after I go through these criteria and why we believe they've been met. But just as an overall idea, this property is unique from physical characteristics both within and outside this property. And you can see what it does to the developability of the property. One is that you have this naturally occurring floodplain, which is this arroyo that runs through. That's about 30% of the entire property. So there is the developable area is squeezed from the top as a result of that floodplain. Solving the traffic problem that exists out there is going to require a dedication to the public of the southern, basically, I think it's 12% or more of this entire property. So the developable area on the property, a good portion of that is being dedicated to the public for the solution. And then you have the result of a taking by the state when they did Ceres Road. They took more property from this land to create that flaring out that Brian does. So I just want to give a sense that this property, when one comes to use it, it is got forces that push it together. And I suspect that part of that was the reason for the variances in the first place that were granted to Beaver Toyota. I want to note to you, at the time the Beaver Toyota master plan and annexation agreement was approved, the variance criteria were slightly different. They were harder back then. You all will be familiar with this. I'm sure you've heard it. They used to be based on what was called a unnecessary, it was a hardship or unnecessary, I can't remember, but it was basically a hardship. And they changed the criteria under the change in the code to the ones that you have in front of them. They are not based on hardship. They allow you much more discretion because, as you might imagine, a hardship is very difficult to establish. And I think that both the commission, the city council and staff, it was a fiction in assessing variances. So under the new code, under the old code, they demonstrated hardship for the 2 variances that were granted and the 2 that we're asking for. We're not required to develop a hardship, to demonstrate a hardship, but I think that we meet the criteria. I'm going to go through those. So I wanted to give you that sort of background as to what the backdrop for our variances are. The code is very clear for you about when you look at what the criteria is, and it's the same for both variances that we're asking for, the slope. I'm going to walk through the first, and we have on this slide, I've tried to summarize them. The criteria as we've drafted them is a little more specific, but I'm going to run through them quickly. One of the criteria you must look at is there some physical characteristic? In this particular property, you can see from the historical aerial photographs, this area where this 30% slope, that is the remnant of the old arroyo bank, because the floodplain runs by it. As you can imagine, the development of Sirius Road dammed up what was that open arroyo, and it changed the course of the waterway, and it forced it further north. And what we have south is this floodplain that really doesn't have any water running through it, except in extraordinary circumstances. I don't think we've seen, maybe once during the 2017 1,000-year event, but you have a remnant of a bank there that created a 30% slope. That is a unique physical characteristic of this land. The idea of not developing, disturbing 30% slopes, as you all know, you see them all the time. They are the prohibition against developing or disturbing 30% slopes has two basic things behind it. And that is, one of them is 30% slopes usually occur on hillsides or in areas that have some topographical elevation to them, where you have these long sloping, and they also occur in areas where there is large swath of a riparian area. This is a remnant of a riparian area, and it's not connected to any other that you find along this arroyo, in the sense that there is nothing else like it except this patch of 11 junipers that is left over from a long time ago. So do we meet this idea that this is a unique physical characteristic of this land? By allowing the variances, we are not doing violence to the policy behind it. We're not disturbing some large steep slope that is on a mountainside or where you can see it, or on an elevated area where you often see steep slopes, or along a long riparian area that is connected to wildlife corridors and the like. That's not what we're doing here, because this is a remnant. The second thing is there a special circumstance that make it infeasible for reasons other than financial cost to develop the property? In this particular instance, as I've described for you, there are forces on this property that aren't ours that compact the developable area of this land, and it affects its feasibility in terms of being able to utilize, giving up 30% of the property for to the regulations and floodplains, the southern basic third of the property for right-of-way, and then what's already happened with the condemnation to the east of this property. The third criteria deals with the intensity of the development, and under a C2, the intensity of allowable development is unaffected by the grant of this variance. You could, in this particular instance, you could, as Dan said, go out and design something different. But something different would look like what we see elsewhere in town, which is 3-story, tall apartment buildings, packed. You could do this same number on the property, but you will have taller buildings. They will not look like individual residential structures. But you could get the same intensity or a greater intensity by going up. So the granting of this variance doesn't allow us to do something that we couldn't otherwise do. Cabin has done something I think is unique to Santa Fe, as Brian said. It has it reads like a residential subdivision. Does not read like an apartment complex. Not that there's anything wrong with apartment complexes, but they have a very distinct feel to them. And you can see just across the way, next to the outlet mall, there is an apartment complex. Similar number of units, all very tall, all very compact. This is very different than that. Intensity is not enhanced by giving this variance. The variance is a minimum variance that will make possible a reasonable use of the land or structure. I think that what we're talking about is highly, highly minimal. It's 0.006% of the entire site. It's not, we're not asking for 5% of this entire site or even 5% of the entire developable area. It's less than 1/10 of 1% of the developable area. It's 0.006% of the entire site. So is it minimal? Yes. Not contrary to the public interest. I've already talked to you about what is the policy behind not disturbing 30% slopes. It's so that you don't scar hillsides, you don't populate hillsides, and you don't interfere with riparian areas that are connected, that are wildlife corridors. That is principally the policy behind 30% slopes, or disturb areas of slopes that are fragile. We're not doing any of that here. So we're not doing violence to the public interest, and this is not contrary to the public. So I'll go on to the other variants, and I'll answer any questions that you might have about those or the like. If you could go to, right. We again tried to summarize here, physical characteristic. What is unusual about this property with respect to the setback? Brian talked a little bit about it, but when you look at the distance between the edge of the right-of-way and our nearest structure, and you calculate that as to what this setback was intended upon, like on this stretch of on Cerillas Road. North on Cerillas Road, property lines come up right next to the right-of-way, and the setback was to be 45 feet from that right-of-way. The idea is those lanes are pretty close up to the property lines on the north side. Physical characteristic here that is different, and it's borne out by the numbers. We are a good distance away, and there's nowhere else on Cerillas Road that creates this. There's one other factor that is physically advantageous for this property. It sits a little lower than Cerillas Road. Everywhere else on Cerillas Road, as you go up, those property lines come almost the same level as Cerillas Road, with a couple of exceptions. This property is lower than Cerillas Road. So the effect of granting us this 11 feet in this large distance of variance is mitigated by the fact that the property is lower. In feasibility, I think we went over this a little bit. I'm not going to repeat it here. The level of density that we are able to achieve with this product is reduced by, I think you lose 6 or you lose 10 of the same product on the which affects the feasibility of doing a project where you're giving up so much right of way and you have this the floodplain to deal with. Again, intensity is unaffected. You could redo a project and go up and do a whole different thing. So granting an 11-foot variance in a 45-foot requirement is not going to allow us some grand development intensity that we could not otherwise achieve. Minimum necessary, that's the other criteria. I think that you can see that 11 feet out of the 45, given the circumstance, is fairly minimal. It's not asking for a majority. It's not even asking for half of that setback to be varied. Again, on the not contrary to public interest, I submit to you that it will be imperceptible from the right of way, whether a house is 11 feet closer than it would otherwise be. So public interest here in this setback was when people are driving down that they would, that the structures would be 45 feet away from the right of way. This is going to be much more than 45 feet from what the normal right of way had been. And there's this additional, and then it'll be another 35 feet. So I don't think that what we're requesting does violence to the public interest, and that these criteria have been met. It is always the case that somebody can redesign a project. The variance criteria ask you to look at these and say, weigh all these factors. We believe we've met them. We believe this is a good project, and the variances we're asking for are in keeping the intent and policies of Chapter 14. We're not doing violence to those ideas. So I wanted to just address a couple of things that Commissioner Markey asked related to the general plan and its relationship to our zoning ordinance. Being an attorney, you will recognize in New Mexico, the state statutes require that every municipality develop a general plan. By and large, those general plans are policy statements, and that their zoning ordinances, in terms of their categorizations, must be consistent, not implement every policy. And we just had cases, all of us spent a lot of time on one that was just written up in the paper where there are conflicting policies in the general plan. The implementing regulations are the ordinances. It is not the policy, either the practice or lawful in New Mexico, to say, I am going to take a should be this way in a general plan, which is a resolution, and make it a requirement of the law. It is not, doesn't work that way. And I just wanted to make that clear so that there was no confusion. The proscriptions and prescriptions of our zoning ordinance are found in Chapter 14. The policies that Chapter 14 is based upon are found in the general plan, and not every policy can be implemented in every ordinance. This particular ordinance does not prohibit gates or gated communities. And I know the history behind the particular provision that you cited, and that had to do with when the general plan was amended in, many of you will remember, in 1999, there was a huge number of gated communities popping up on the east side of town. And they amended the general plan so that you wouldn't have these big walled off, very expensive, exclusive communities that were separate from the rest of the community. That's where that policy came. It was not implemented in the ordinances, unfortunately or fortunately. It is not what was intended in a development like this. This is housing on a much larger scale and a much more intense scale than that policy was aimed at. And I think that's borne out in the general plan itself. And then just the last thing I'd like to say is that Commissioner Markey asked about, well, how is this connectivity? And I think you were going to the public use of trails and that sort of thing. And if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But there is a big difference with the dedication of public trails within a piece of property and the liability that goes along with that and the maintenance that goes along with that than there is for private trails. And so the distinction here is important to this development, that these trails that are within the development remain private from a liability and maintenance standpoint. And I would just like to point that out. And then finally, the last option that I think that Commissioner Morondo asked, well, how do we, is there a way to not make a decision tonight if that's how we felt? And just wanted to add that in our system, you can table a case and I think that's the same as postponing without, I think you were talking about continuing the hearing. The tabling of a case or a postponement allows you to do it to a date certain and allows you to continue where you left off. And I just wanted to make that clear because I think that's what your question kind of went to. In other jurisdictions, you have to start over and nobody wants to do that. And I just wanted to lay that on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Klug, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may, thank you. Just to clarify, so tabling would need to result in taking up the case at the same hearing. So it would not be tabling, it would be a postponement. Otherwise, we agree with Mr. Summer.
Thank you. Is there anything else from the applicant before we go to any questions?
I just want to say thank you for your patience. We had a long presentation tonight and you were great to weather through that. So we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant team before we move to the public hearing? Commissioner Morondo?
I could wait for the public hearing for most of it, but just as a general question, I think it might be nice to ask staff about what the decorum is within our body of speaking about the case before the applicant does their presentation, because it's come up a couple of times, and frankly, I'm not clear if we're asking questions of staff after their presentation, they should be specifically aimed at staff, correct?
Yes.
I've been guilty of it myself.
When I chair the meeting, I try to be very specific that we want these to be clarifying questions about what the presentation is. And then we have time for additional discussion and additional questions at the end.
Thank you.
Commissioner Markey?
I do have a couple of clarifying questions on the presentation. Does the water department staff concur that the water budget has been complete? And I heard a number in reference to the residential units, but I didn't hear a number relating to the pool. I assume that a pool has a certain acre foot requirement, and maybe the clubhouse too as a gathering spot.
Commissioner, was that for me or should I can definitely answer that.
I guess I'm seeking, do we have anybody from the water department here?
Hey, Alan. Yeah, Commissioner, if you want to introduce yourself and.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Alan Hook. I'm a water resource coordinator, and a lot of times review these development water budgets for applicants on development projects. So you had a very good question, Commissioner. And I did look it up in our code. It's Exhibit A in Chapter 25 of our code. It mentions in multi-family residential service, it applies where a single water meter serves more than one dwelling unit for normal domestic water. And it states that single meter may also serve uses commonly used or associated with multiple dwelling units. And it goes on and states swimming pools, spas, landscaping, and common rooms. And as long as their use is limited to the residents and their guests and are not open to the general public, or to memberships for persons not residing there. So that's why we, in many ways, we didn't call out the pool and the common, I think it's called a common room or the clubhouse in this situation. And the other thing is in Dan's presentation, I think Brian Neninger mentioned this. In Brian's presentation, it kind of showed the water infrastructure was throughout the property, but we're actually finalized on the water plan. It's going to be a master meter. So it'll be a single meter for all the domestic service and the fire flow. And then there will be a separate irrigation meter for all that open space and landscaping. So given it's a single master meter, it's all the pool and the clubhouse will be covered under that water use of, I think 27 plus acre feet.
And then a clarifying question on that. So the standard you're applying is a multi-unit residential structure, but these are single family. Some of these are single family, some have one shared wall, but a lot of them are freestanding homes. So I don't know that that complies with the definition of a multi-unit building.
Yeah, and that's what the application applied for, given these aren't like permanent single-family residential homes. It is a project that came in as a multifamily residence.
Right, but the question of whether the structures are leased or sold, it's a question of the structure itself. So these structures are single-family structures. They're not multi-unit structures. And there
Right.
is,
So
you
in
know-
our, just sorry to clarify, in our analysis of single-family residential, we usually do it single-family residence per lot. So our definition of water use would be per lot. These aren't per lot. It's just a single lot with multifamily residences.
yeah.
So just for clarification, in the sales of real estate in Santa Fe, we actually designate single family as attached and detached in sales, just so you know.
Yeah,
Thank you, Commissioner Breland. Commissioner Markey, did you have anything else?
I guess I don't, without looking at the regulations, you know, that the water department's following, I can't verify it, but I mean, a multi-unit structure is different. If I live on the 5th floor of a building, I don't have an exterior faucet. And so the water calculation for my use is going to be lower because I'm not going to have an external faucet. And so I don't know, you know, these structures do have a small patio. People are probably going to have plants and they're going to water them. So these are the considerations that go into water factors when you're assigning water factors to different kinds of development. So I don't think that the multifamily calculation is correct for the project. So I guess I'm just going to say I have to, for the time being, disagree with that. And I do have other questions, so I'm going to move on with that. Without visuals to accompany the traffic presentation, I couldn't follow some of what was being said. And then there was the dialogue box that blocked out some things. So when you were referencing turn lanes on Beckner, were you talking about the project side of Cerritos where Beckner's going to be extended, or the outlet mall side of Cerritos?
I can clarify that. So Commissioner Markey, Chair Lawrence, it was the west side of that interchange. So it was the frontage road, not the Beckner Road side.
Okay, thank you. And then also without a reference to an exhibit, like we just have what's on our computer screen. We're not given printed materials. So without referencing an exhibit or a PDF page, it can be hard for us to follow where you are in the presentation. So I would just ask that we have that information. So specifically when you were talking about the MPO conditions and you were talking about condition 14, 17, I couldn't find those. I was scanning through all my materials. I found MPO conditions 1 through 10. I didn't find 14 and 17. And
I will clarify. I can see where the confusion is because what I was using was the numbering scheme that Dan used in his staff report, where he compiled all the conditions together. You could have been looking at an individual MPO report where they have their conditions numbered and then Water Division has their conditions numbered. That's kind of how we get our feedback from the DRT. And then when Dan does his report, he puts them all together in one log. And so the numbering may not be consistent. Yeah. So those numbers will make sense looking at the staff report condition table.
the staff report has,
This page 4 of the staff report, Commissioner Markey has the list of recommended conditions from staff.
and that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Lucero?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm a little confused about public versus private trails on the development. So I'm specifically looking at the trail that comes from the roundabout and it meanders kind of through where the setback is and up to Herrera Drive. That is open?
Public.
That is public.
Yeah, that is in a right of way. That is an MDOT right of way. And then I think it transitions at some point. I'm not sure exactly where to the city. but that is public.
So then would you be, as the developer, required to maintain that trail? And then any sort of,
I think the way that works is there's an easement that's inferred or built into the development plan, and we build it, and then the city at that point will maintain it. But I'm gonna look back at Carl shaking his head yes, and I'm gonna look at you all as well. But that's typically how it's done. That's why there's not the liability issue.
all right. And I didn't hear anything in regard to the landscaping of that area. Is that something that falls under your purview as a developer?
You know, right now our landscaping stays within our lot line, and a lot of that area is already natural landscaped or, has natural grasses and trees. We did not landscape that area. We are kind of recognizing the tree survey that is there and respecting that with our path, our trail choice. One thing I should clarify too is that area is bermed. So it's even more forgiving than what Carl had talked about earlier. Not only we're not on the same level and drop down, there's a berm before you go to our drop. So, we're a minimum of 10 feet lower where the base of the house is, sometimes 15, 20, depending on where you're at and where Cerritos Road is. So this thing is not going to jump out at you and grab you.
Right, gotcha. One other thing is, this looks like a great trail and all, but I'm wondering about connectivity to the Mutt Nelson area, Prince Road. How will residents from that area be able to connect, pedestrians be able to connect to this area and utilize this?
So we'd stop our asphalt trail in our proposal at the property line to the south. And so that's a good question. There's another lot that's between us, another property owner in Mutt Nelson. And so presumably when they develop that lot, that would be the time to complete that trail. In the interim, similar to what's going on in the Arroyo, there's again a natural trail. It's dirt, right? So if it's raining or that type of thing, right, you're probably not going to use it, but people use it today. It's obviously dry here a lot. Sometimes we have monsoons and it's not, but there is a sort of a continuation of that. So if you're riding a bike, for example, you still have a way to get to Mutt Nelson to our asphalt trail. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. What about Prince Road? Prince Road is right there, and I'm wondering, is there that dirt connector?
It's land. There's a fence. There's a I don't know if it's barbed wire or slick wire, but there's a wire fence between the property to our direct south and Prince Road. It does not go through. So Mutt Nelson is the only connector that goes through. So we're kind of landlocked. Like we don't have a right of way, and we don't have a way on our own property to get to Prince from our site.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Miranda?
Sure. Just as a state, the single family came up before, and I want to make sure that my understanding of this is the same as staff. So the differentiation would be single family versus detached. This is multifamily detached, which is very different from a code and zoning perspective from single family. And what it has to do with is lot line. If this was to be single family, we'd be looking at a bunch of different condominiums, or whatever the minimum lot requirement broken up. And so when we bring up new product, that's really what we're talking about. This hasn't happened much in Santa Fe. But from a code and zoning perspective, that's why the water budget is what it is. It couldn't be single family.
And that is a question for staff to confirm.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Morondo, yes, your assessment is correct. So this is a multifamily project because it's built on one lot. We got the definition right here. So dwelling multifamily, a residential building containing 2 or more dwelling units on one lot, or 2 or more detached principal units on one lot.
I do then have some questions for the applicant.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So you brought up the berm, and I saw some language in the packet on the berm, but I'd like to get a lot more specific, if I could, about the section between the frontage road and your proposal, because I'm unclear exactly what we'll see, and actually, if you'd rather have the public weigh in before we get into more questions, we could do that.
If you are fine waiting, then I would suggest we do the public hearing and then we can continue our questions. All right. This is a public hearing. If there is anyone here who would like to speak on these requests, please come forward.
Commissioners, thank you. I'm just.
Do you need to be
Oh, yeah.
sworn in?
For me.
Please raise your right hand. State your name and address for the record.
Rick Martinez, 725 Mesilla Road.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
He's been sworn in, Madam Chair.
What I'm going to do here is I'm just doing a protest statement. And the reason I'm doing a protest statement is because this is new to us. I mean, there's already one project that's been approved of this kind of a project where it's all rentals. It's a single family homes. It's on 19 acres, a little over 19 acres. There's 141 units of that. And when you have single family homes, they're always have to provide affordable units. So what we're losing out on the south side of this town, this area, special area of this town, is 21 affordable units that we're losing out. And that I feel is a shame. And like Mr. Esquivel said, there's more of these projects probably in the pipeline coming down. And you guys are not elected officials. So I'm here to have you guys tell our elected officials that this is not the right way we should be growing Santa Fe without any affordable use and letting them pay and fee in lieu of $400,000 for 21 units is all they're giving for this project. And they're mostly out-of-state developers. They don't give back to the community. By giving back to the community, you provide affordable housing. This is not happening in a project like this. I just don't like seeing single family homes like this where they're turning in rentals in the future coming up where they can pay the fee in lieu of. There should be a policy, and I'm hoping you guys would come out and push that policy that this shouldn't be coming forward. Like I say, this is a protest statement. The project looks good. It will look better with a couple of affordable units in there, but there's not one. But and the thing is with the rentals, you only do it for 10 years. They could add a couple of affordable units for 10 years, then it goes back into their pocket. They took back to the market rate, whatever it is. But I'm just asking you guys to just please go ahead and say something to our city officials, because I try to do it and it goes out one year out the other, and nobody's listening. And I'm hoping you guys would listen and forward this to them, because like I say, it's a protest statement. It's the only way I can find it, the only venue I can do it. I can write to the paper, but you still get everybody. But you guys have some authority. Like I say, once again, you're not elected and non-elected officials, but you are making decisions for the community, and I respect what you guys do. But I also would hope you guys would move forward with this. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Is anyone else here to speak as part of the public hearing this evening? Director Klug, can you help see if there's anyone on Zoom, please? If there is anyone on Zoom who would like to speak as part of this public hearing, please indicate so by raising your hand on the Zoom system.
Madam Chair, it looks like we have 4 attendees on Zoom, 3 of which are staff. Appears that there's 1 member from the public and he is not raising his hand.
Thank you. If there is no one else who would like to speak from the public on these cases, then the public hearing is now closed, and we open it up to other questions and discussion from the commission. Commissioner Miranda, would you like to continue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some questions, I think, for the applicant first, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I think the first thing would be like to go back to your site plan and see if you can describe a little bit better what folks would see from the new development to the frontage road? Because just as a general statement in terms of this used to be a master plan for a car dealership and all that, it's somewhat, the setback is almost different in its context here than there, right? In that development, we would be screening the development from residences around it.
Yes.
This one, it's the opposite, right? So what I'd like to get a better idea of is how, if we're doing that. I completely appreciate the point that lower on the, down the development where you get out to the intersection, we've got a really good setback there. That being said, the properties above the site that you talk about, could you tell me what they are? You showed the setback. It's 24 feet, is that right?
Yeah, those are, you know, where the subway is, that's that string or run of buildings is what I was referring to there on the setback.
It's the subway.
And now that's quite a bit further to the north, but that's what it is.
So for me, my concern with the setback then would be it's actually screening the people that you're going to be renting to from the road. So I wonder if you could show, you know, what is that berm? What's the height of that berm? Can you show the landscaping? To me, that's the meat of whether this setback variance has footing.
Okay. I think we can. And Maggie, what I'm thinking, if you just scroll backwards to there you go. The first plant, there you go. Yeah, that's it. And it's, this one's not quite as big as the other, but it's close enough. I think we can read that. So the berm we're talking about is where Maggie just had her cursor. Is that correct? We have two, and I'll talk about both of them. So I do have a diagram up right now that it's an engineer's diagram, and it's a scale, and it's in a log format. So it's a little bit difficult, but what I do have is the numbers. So if you look at that berm and the location of that berm, and if we would call the top of that 0, so from the trail to the property line, roughly in the center is the peak of that berm, roughly. It's a little off. It might be a little further west, but it's close. So if we called that 0, and then we went and we looked at the first, and I'm sorry, I'm going to blow this up because my old eyes is wrong. So if we look at that first, from the peak of that berm, calling that 0, to the floor plate of the first residence, do my math right here, we've got almost 15 feet. So I think what I heard you say, Commissioner, that screening was good when it was an automotive dealership. Maybe it's not as good when it's a residential, or I don't know, but that's the case. Is there's a considerable amount of screening. Now it will taper off. So you have to also look going north. And if we kind of go from the corner of that intersection, sort of at a diagonal, that's a peak. And then as we go north, it does start to drop off. And, you know, we would be able to supply, you know, some additional information. But when you're sitting at the intersection coming into town, and you're sitting at this Rios Road and Beckner or Frontage Road, whichever one you call it, and you look to your left, you know, you're going to see a few things around the roundabout. They're going to be also a little recessed. You're not going to see much right there at that hard corner. As you go through the intersection and travel north, more and more will reveal itself, but you're kind of looking forward and things are sort of getting to be over your shoulder.
So 15 feet though would be and that's demonstrated in the grading, I'm assuming, that's been submitted.
It is, and I actually gave some feedback because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but I'm looking at my scale and I'm looking what's existing and I'm looking what's coming. It's actually more at the lowest spot, but at that location, conservatively, that's about where we would be. So these houses, I think the tallest, I say in my development plan somewhere, nothing more than 28 feet, again, being conservative. I think the tallest is around less than 27.
And didn't see, I don't recall in the packet much more than this indicating landscaping, right?
There, so in the, should be in the applicant materials, we do have blown landscape drawings. So with our development plan, there's a lot of them. There's a lot to read.
You've got you show irrigation and all that. I just mean, you represent the planting faithfully in this.
Yes, so the landscape plan is within the boundaries of the property. So again, I want to just clarify, because that came up with Commissioner Lucero. Are you doing any landscaping out there in the NMDOT right away? We're putting in the 8-foot path, but we're not adding any landscaping. There's, as you know, there's some trees, there's some things going on out there, but we're kind of leaving it wildscape at the moment.
Do you have photos of that area specifically? I didn't see it captured.
I'm trying to, I've got a whole bunch of that 30% slope.
I know.
My apologies. I don't think I have an accurate representation. I've got one of a notice poster, but it's not quite in the right area.
I mean, you might see where I'm going. Like for the variance request, it just seems like the screening to the road is not very gracious. And if you were asking for this, at the very least, document what it looks like, right? I had very little idea of what you're actually doing out there.
It's a fair point. But, and I guess the way I would answer that is we don't have the photographs today. I can tell you that 15 feet pretty much almost hides single story units. It won't hide the 2-story units. And again, it tapers off. So I understand your point.
This is about, you're putting what does look like single family residence, right? Pretty close to a major road in an area that doesn't have that, right? So the screening is actually the other way, right? And I just don't, particularly because honestly, if you didn't ask for the variance, you wouldn't be hearing this, but you're asking for it, and I get why, but I think if you're going to have that ask, you need to give more for it. And I don't see it.
So you would like some additional materials to understand that berming and that visibility. And to make sure that I'm clear, Commissioner Morondo, you're thinking about it in terms of shielding the units from the road as much as shielding the development from the road.
That's right.
Okay.
More the first than the latter. But and really just the landscaping, it just looks really sparse.
Yeah.
From in the way it's submitted right now. I don't remember, what's the design team? I mean, I see Tierra West here.
It's Coleman. Coleman Design Group is the landscaper. And honestly, I got to go back and look at some of Lawrence's comments. I think we were asked to reduce some things because of water. So it's that balance. But my sense is that we may not have articulated it well enough in the drawings that we provided, but my sense is it's landscaped as intense as any of the other sort of I'll say multifamily and residential developments that I've seen historically. I don't think we're out of character, but I think it's a fair statement and we could go back and look at it.
There's two things. You said it's a new product, and you're right. And I think it's interesting, Commissioner, pronunciation wise, Marquis. There's, I think, very good comments about that new use, because there is, even though regardless of what zoning or code says, it might have a different water use because they're all detached, right? Like this. And yeah, you can do 2 floors easily on that site. I think what's hard about this is the ask for the variance on the front. I just didn't see enough documentation of screening personally to feel good about that. I wanted to ask the question, see if there's more that wasn't clear to me in the packet. The only other thing I'd say, I get the whole pitched roof thing, but this is a new product. Oh, wait. Yeah.
My apologies.
No, it's good.
Good question back here, and I'll relay that in a second.
Yeah. And it's it's harder to visualize. We're looking at, we're being proposed elevations that are a lot different than the character of what's normally presented. And just frankly, as a whole, because of the way it looks and the format of how it's laid out, I think it's a very good idea. And I think the civil engineering in terms of how the traffic is handled is even innovative. I think you did a great job. That was a big problem, but I wonder if in that detached structure, all of those, I get that you want to get to a certain number, and I think you might be able to get there. I'm not sure if there's enough open space amenity identified. One, as it buffers the frontage road, but also just within the units, because it's unclear to me. I think if you're going to propose something like this that we haven't seen as much, there should be more specific documentation of what that's going to feel like, where those yards are and what it looks like when you're in between them. I don't, look, you were delayed because of essentially a technical issue, and I'm sure everybody apologized to you, but I'm going to do it. I'm sorry that happened. I'm relaying my issues like this. I don't generally do this, actually. I'll just vote, right? I'm doing this because I'm trying to be helpful to this specific application, because I think it's a great idea. And I think a lot of it is strong. The way you manage the traffic was too. But honestly, I see issues in the layout and screening that could just be a matter of you doing more specific imagery to us about it.
Sure.
And I get that that's more than the required, but when you do something that's a little different, sometimes you need to.
I really appreciate that, Commissioner Morondo, and I would tell you that we could provide that information. One of the things that I guess was going through our mind, and we walk the project, sometimes we get too familiar with our own project. So, but we're out there looking at their already 200-foot setback and just the right of way compared to other areas. It seems like a long way, and then we're seeing the berm and the dip, and so it's right here in front of mine. But I think we need to make sure it's in front of your mind and clear. I will say that along the frontage road, we do have a considerable number of street trees. So we are really enhancing typical is what is required by code with those street trees along that area. Because we're right on the street, and we're I'm not trying to,
I hear you.
We're required to do it, right? But it's also a nice addition in terms of screening there. But your concern is more on Cerritos Road, and so I understand.
Yeah, and the other question I guess I'd have, a general one, but why bungalow in design? They do look generally like bungalow. Sorry. Yeah.
We're good. We want to offer solutions.
We've been paying very close attention to what you're saying, and then just to summarize, my understanding is if you're asking for the 11-foot reduction in the setback, from your perspective, how does that feel looking at the road for those people who are there? Speaking to the principal for the applicant, since that berm is in a right of way, we have no problem enhancing it if the DOT would allow it, and proposing that and checking with them to see that they would, so that you would have a better sense of, okay, so what is it actually there? Because I think we understand what you're saying is you're asking for this, but I don't know what the impact is for them looking out that way. And we'd be willing to do that if DOT would allow us to enhance that, because we agree with what you're talking.
That or more planting behind it that is on your property, right? It'd be, or both. But the other question would be, why does, I mean, the architecture has come up, right? And I just as a general question, why are they bungalows in style? I'm honestly curious.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, why are they bungalow style? Well, I tell you why. So Cabin Company's trademark is bungalows. So when they go with this project, it's bungalows on Cerritos or bungalows, in Las Lunas or wherever the project is.
Yeah.
Trademark is bungalow, because that denotes a certain quality of product and what prospective tenants are going to receive.
just want to make sure, I'm not saying the word, I'm saying literally the design of it, right?
Oh, literally the
Yeah,
design.
literally the design, because it is, you could describe it as a bungalow style. That's a distinct style. So
Yes.
why is it bungalow style?
Well, I think I guess the way I would characterize that, and we spent more time recently with the city on the architecture. Early on, we talked quite a bit to Maggie about windows and locations and making sure we're far enough away from corners and things of that nature. We didn't get really down too much into the details. You know, we have stucco facades and pitched roofs. I guess the way I'd articulate it is we want to work with the city staff, this planning commission, and provide a product that you're happy with and feels like represents Santa Fe style. We have no argument. We missed the mark this first round. And so, you know, our commitment to you is to straighten that out.
Thank you.
Other questions? Director Klug, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt, but I did have 2 quick points. So we can bring up the street view from Cerritos looking onto the property if you all would like that, if it would help. Also, I'd like to point out that you know, the commission has requested in the past site sections that would be relevant in this case. I don't believe that staff asked for that, just as point of information. We can ask for it. We could definitely, you know, review that administratively if needed to, you know, answer your concerns. Also, we've added it to the checklist for new development plans, so it will be required from now on for new developments.
Thank you. I saw some nods about the street view. If you want to pull that up, we can take a look. Yes, Mr.
Just want
Esquivel.
to let you know that we did get Alexandra Ladd in from her, so she's here for affordable housing. And I just want to remind you, you still have some staff if you need to ask questions of any of them.
Thank you, Mr. Esquivel. That is difficult to see. It doesn't look like much of a rise there at all from that view. We may need additional information if commissioners want to request it specifically.
You know, it runs through here and then it tapers back down to like a finish grade with the road. So.
Thank you for that. It does seem like we might need more information if people choose to request it. Are there other questions or points of discussion that commissioners would like to make at this time? Commissioner Breland.
So just to point out, the necessity for the housing, as we all know, is needed in Santa Fe. I have multiple clients that are asking for a similar product to this, maybe not in this particular area, but they are looking for this. They want to downsize their homes. They want to stay in Santa Fe. They want a simple solution. So a project like this is nice, whether or not it's fully ready. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been said here, but I don't think we should just disregard this in any sense as far as that goes, because there is a need. The lack of the affordable housing, I agree with Mr. Martinez full-heartedly. I, you know, graduated from Capitol High School. A lot of my friends are having to leave here because of that. So, you know, we do need the affordable housing, but rules are rules, and multifamily, they're unfortunately able to do the fee. And that's my only comment. So thank you for the great presentation, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner Markey.
Want to have staff clarify. So if we're going to find a variance, we would need to make the findings in 14-3.16. So there's approval criteria, and one of them is unusual physical characteristics exist that distinguish the land from others in the vicinity that are subject to the same provisions and that existed at the time the regulation was adopted. So whenever the slope rule was adopted or the setback rule was adopted. So I guess I haven't heard from the applicant what that unique physical or unusual physical characteristic is I heard that there's, that the slope itself is unusual, but that can't be the grounds for a variance from the slope requirement. The slope itself is not the unusual characteristic. It would need to be something else about the property that makes it difficult to develop with the requirements in place. And I don't see that this property is particularly difficult to develop. Yeah, there's some characteristics like the arroyo, but rarely do you find property that, you know, is perfect when it's an outlying property like that in nature. Nature is inherently chaotic. So there's random slopes, and that's one of the reasons we don't want to mow down slopes is we want to maintain a natural look to a place. We don't want to flatten it. So I just want to verify with staff though that if we're going to grant a variance, we would need to state findings for that section.
And that is correct. And I know that Mr. Summer, Commissioner, did also say their interpretation of those findings. Whether or not we agree with them is our decision. But staff, did you have anything else in response to that?
Thank you. Commissioner Lawrence and Commissioner Markey. Yeah, you cited the correct section, and there are several, I think there's at least 5, I don't have it right in front of me, approval criteria that must be met for a variance.
Other questions or discussion, or potentially a motion for discussion?
I would have one point of discussion, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
On the slopes, because I found the applicant's points on setback actually in a lot of ways more compelling than the slope. That being said, this site is to me specific in slope just in that so much of it was destroyed previously, and the character of that arroyo and what made the slope originally was changed by the development on the road. That is my understanding of what we're actually looking at. I don't think it means that the exception or the variance should necessarily just be accepted out of hand, but that's my understanding of the argument. And I think particularly with the slope, one thing that wasn't brought up was just the idea of drainage in 50% or 15% slopes. I think that's very significant, but I do think, at least my reading of the full context at play, the development with the road did change the drainage that originally made that slope. That made me more comfortable with the idea of it. As a whole, I kind of feel similar about the slope variance as the setback, in that I can see a foothold for the context on site, why they would do it. If there was just a bunch of 15 or greater slope on the back of that site that was not disturbed, I don't know how you can touch it. But because most of it was changed already on the site and there's this little sliver left, I can see it. I think the application there was a rendering showing what they were going to do there, right? How they were going to pretty it up. And to me, I don't know if that's enough for the ask. And it wasn't very clear even what they were committing to. So to me, I think maybe we just be more specific about what we could ask for both of those variances. That's at least, I don't know if anybody else has any.
Commissioner Miranda, help me understand. Are you suggesting perhaps asking them specifically for more information before we make a decision? Or are you suggesting making a decision tonight and providing future guidance?
I think we give them the option.
That sounds like a potential motion whenever you decide that you're ready. Other discussion, other comments? Commissioner Markey.
I mean, I guess I don't see what the unusual physical characteristic is that we are looking at a variance as the basis for the variance. So that's where, for me, it's hard to ask them, you know, could you see if DOT would allow you to build the berm higher? Or, you know, could you do other things if that doesn't actually get to the heart of the issue? And the other is that the right of way is owned by DOT and they could use it at some point. So, I mean, we don't have any guarantee that that right of way is going to remain open space as it is today. They might see a need for it at some point and develop it. And so we can't really count their right of way as part of the setback. So when that applicant was showing, well, look, there's this really wide distance between Cerrillos Road and the development, it's owned by somebody else and they could develop it at a later date.
I'm comfortable with silence.
Could I ask a question of the applicant?
Commissioner Miranda, go ahead.
Could I ask a question of the applicant? So if I put some options to you, if a proposal was to be made that essentially said, we would vote on it and administratively, as a condition of approval, we would need to see more intensive screening between the right of way and the development, not on the right of way at all, and basically a more considerate give to the community you're going to have there, particularly around where you're going into the 15%. Would that make any sense to you?
Commissioner Miranda, make sure that I understand the last portion, particularly where we're going into that last thing. I apologize, I did not quite hear.
Yeah. Where you're occupying into 15%, you include in your application more of an offering to the community you're building.
I think I know we're willing to do that with regard to the berm and the screening. So I guess my answer is, I think I'm saying yes, if I understand your question correctly, to find a way to berm and screen it in a manner that's satisfactory. And we're talking about the area around kind of the Cerrillos Road North, at that area.
But also at the 15% slope where you're taking out that 15%.
My apologies, I'm sorry.
Giving some.
In my head, I had the 30%, so I wasn't tracking and now I'm tracking. So yes, and the intent of that, when we were working with the city engineer, Ms. Beingessner basically was saying, well, what do you do? What's your mitigation plan? And that's where those trailheads came in. And so it sounds to me like that's our mitigation plan. If the planning commission is so inclined, we can elaborate on that. We could expand on that.
Can someone help me with case numbers here? My iPad's on. Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, Commissioner Miranda.
As a clarification, can I make a motion with, for all three cases at once if I cite them? No. So for the variances, then we have to rule on the variances first and then go to the development plan, or?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, that is correct, because his application, his design is based with those variances intact. Without those variances, his design falls apart and he has to redesign in order to accommodate something different. And we based our recommendation on our findings. So if you're going to change from those findings, you have to either accept Carl's findings, or you have to establish your own findings so that the record is clear and it helps us for the future come up with the findings of facts and conclusions of law that we bring back to you or what actually happened here tonight.
But we have to rule on each individually first. All right.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Markey, go ahead.
Yes, I out of respect for the applicant, I know that this hearing was continued several times and it's been a long process. And so I just think that certainty is good where it can be found. And I would make a motion to deny both variance applications. Because I don't see that the information we're requesting would change my mind. We're still not honing in on what's the unusual physical characteristic that makes this property difficult to develop.
Is there a second for that motion?
I can withdraw my motion.
Commissioner?
If, I guess this is a question of staff, if we, hypothetically, if we denied the two variances and voted on the development plan, essentially, if we gave, the variances have been discussed in this meeting, and if they wanted to reapply with more information, I suppose they could. That essentially be what would happen with the variances? They'd be reapplying?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Miranda, I'm not quite sure I understand where you're going with this.
Maybe I don't.
Are you asking if you completely denied the variances and denied the development plan, would that force a brand new application? Yes.
Commissioner McGee?
So I think what he's saying is if we deny the variances, but then we approve the development plan, I'm assuming that the applicant would need to appeal our denials in order to come back. Is that true?
That's what I'm, yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner McGee, not necessarily. If the applicant were to appeal your decision tonight, it goes to the governing body. If the applicant decides not to appeal those variances and redesign the application, then depending on how you structure your approval, either staff will take care of it and run it through its course until it's recorded, or it comes back to this body for your decision again.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Smith?
my question would be in that regard, we were given 4 options earlier. The 4th option involved the staff, as I remember it, working with the developer to work on the variances. Could somebody am I correct in that? And if so, I might want to include that in the motion.
Mr. Escabel, can you address that?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Smith, if I understand you right, you're asking if you deny the variances and approve the development plan, but send the development plan back to staff to address a redesign in order to record it, file it, and move it forward. Could you do that? The answer is yes. That is, anytime we get to work administratively, it does help with resources on our end because we are severely.
But that would be a redesign that did not include any variances as they have been discussed.
That's right. And that redesign would only have to deal with those two areas that they're asking variances for. So the setback, they would have to meet the setback. So you're looking at 11 feet that they'd have to push those homes back, which would also impact other houses. The 30% slope where they have houses built on that, they would have to move those outside of that 30% slope in order to make those houses work. So it's quite an effort to redesign. So they would have to do that in order for that to work and then move it forward. And then you would have to trust the staff to make sure that it was done well to code, which we would force that to happen.
And could I ask again, and what was the third option? You gave 4, Daniel.
You may
Because
need to go back
I'm-
to the tape for that, Commissioner Smith.
oh my, well, if you say so, I'm used to a slightly more informal procedure, but there were 4 options. And the third one, the first 2 were very start again. And the third one and the fourth one were more how we could go forward.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
One second, Commissioner Morales.
So the way I look at the planning commission's options, one, you can approve the variances by either one, accepting Mr. Summers' interpretation or of chapter 14's findings of facts or findings for the variances. You can build your own. In which case you would approve the variances, approve the development plan. This case is done. It moves forward to the post-development plan with those variances. 2, you could deny the variances, but approve the development plan subject to a redesign, allowing staff to process it post-development with that new redesign. It doesn't come back. 3, you could deny all of it altogether, in which case that could force the applicant to provide a new application, or any kind of denial from this body is automatically available for an appeal to the governing body. And the last one is that you could postpone the application in order to require the applicant to address your concerns, bring it back for a new look at it to see whether or not it met your ideals of what you're looking for today.
Commissioner Miranda.
I be permitted one more question to the applicant.
Go ahead.
I think we're going to get there. Hypothetically, postponement or disapproval of variances, would you have a feeling one way or another? If clearly I cannot approve this I cannot give you criteria based on what you've provided me. I believe you might be able to.
So the way I'm looking, obviously we'd want to be approved this evening, right? There's no question that would be what we would be doing if we could get there. But if we can't get there, but could get there with more information, then we would be willing to provide more information. I'm not sure which option this was. It may be another option, but the idea that the project variances could be approved pending certain conditions being met, that would be probably our preference, right? And then secondly, though, if that's not doable,
without the variances, though,
that would be probably would have to be with, and I may be misunderstanding this, Madam Chair, Commissioner Miranda. Sorry, and I'm going to let Carl's got some.
Just speaking to Mr. Hall, as I understand what you're saying is Sorry, well, as I understand what you're saying is that, right now, there is a significant concern about the variances for two reasons. One is more information is needed. And second of all, with that more information, perhaps greater enhancements that are explained. Can't do that tonight because the information is not here. We would prefer that you postpone it, allow us to work with staff to get you that information going through the record so that we understand and we can present it. I recognize that we will not be able to satisfy everybody, but I believe that what you're asking for is more information and perhaps greater enhancements in mitigating. We would prefer that than to a denial of the variances. I'd like to give that the best shot that we possibly can so that you feel that if you granted the variances, you were protecting the public interest. So that should be clear.
And I just want to be clear, I can only speak for myself here, but it wouldn't just be, you know, I can read drawings, it would be given more. Yeah.
Mr. Escabel, go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Miranda, there's actually we'll add a fifth option. You do have the ability to structure a condition that will allow the staff to ensure that additional mitigation has been done to staff satisfaction. If you were to approve those variances, allowing it to move forward so that it would be up to Jason to approve that mitigation. And if it does meet with his standards, then it would just move to the post review because it would already be approved. And that would allow for the greatest flexibility on both sides.
Commissioner Markey, go ahead.
And listening to the dialogue and trying to think about how we might be able to move forward. And it sounds like more information is needed, maybe more time is needed to really digest what we heard tonight and look at the material again based on what we heard. So I would make a motion that we postpone to the meeting next month, and that when this is brought back to us, that we have mock images, visual images that show what this project looks like from different angles, from inside, from outside, what the architectural style will be, since that's in flux and it's going to change. And so those visuals would be extremely helpful to have. And then that would be, I guess actually yes, in a discussion from both the staff and the applicant about the water factors. I still would like to understand that better. And that would be my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions about your motion before we see about the second. One is from staff, whether this could appear on the agenda for the June meeting or if that agenda has already been published.
Madam Chair, thank you. So staff would prefer if the postponement is approved to postpone to the second meeting in June. Excuse me, of July, I apologize. So that it would remain on old business and it would give the applicant, if the applicant is amenable, it would give the applicant time to thoroughly respond.
And I wanted to ask the applicant if that would be enough time for you to prepare a response.
It's enough time. Did you say the second meeting in July? I thought you meant June.
I did mean June.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought when you said.
I apologize.
That's all right. Yeah, that would be plenty of time for us to do what we need to do.
Thank you. Then I will ask, is there a second to Commissioner Markey's motion?
Second.
All right, then I think we need to run a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner McGee,
Yes.
Commissioner Reland,
Yes.
Commissioner Markey,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lawrence.
The chair does not generally vote on these motions unless there's a tie.
Sorry, I was going through the list. And Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
So that is 6 votes. You have a quorum. We have a majority.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. That passes. We will look forward to seeing you all again in a few weeks. Thank you. Is everyone clear about what additional information has been requested? I'm seeing nods. Okay, thank you.
Could we also get locations of the two-story structures? Because that would be a good help to see where you guys plan on placing those. within the development. Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to staff communications. Are there any updates on the land use? work?
Madam Chair, I don't think we have any updates for tonight. I could tell you, yeah, the land development code, is moving forward. Phase 1 is being reviewed by the Community Advisory Working Group and the Technical Advisory Working Group. They met today to go over the use table, and I think they had a good meeting. General plan update. We are headed for, we're routed for committees and governing body approval of the contract by the end of the month.
You cannot say who the contractor is yet, or is that?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Any matters from the commission? Thank you all. We're adjourned.